was a big decision that came out this week, which was that a superior court in Alberta, an Alberta appeal court, voted that the punitive, harmful Bill C-69, which was the law that required all kinds of really intensive assessments, including like gendered assessments, that would, impact whether or not projects would be allowed to go through in Alberta. Basically, this idea, I think it was dubbed the No More Pipeline Bill by critics in Alberta, because it was just this really punitive environmental bureaucracy that was placed, this onus placed on oil and gas companies, public companies, before getting anything approved. So the Alberta government pushed back and said this is against the Constitution. They challenged it, and a court in Alberta found that was right, that they agreed with the agreed with the Kenney government in Alberta that this environmental impact law was unconstitutional. And I just want to talk, because the theme of the show, and we call it Fake News Friday, because the idea that the media, they pretend to be straight news journalists, they pretend to be neutral, but really what they're doing is activism, and it's just a charade. Like they pretend to be neutral, but they're not. And I think this is one of those stories that you might not see it the first time you read it, or most people might not catch all of the nuances. But when you read through a piece like this, which it was written by the Canadian press, of course, that means that it appears in newspapers and websites all across the country. This one here we have, it was placed in Global News, but typically CP runs and everything, including sites that people think of as conservative, like the National Post or the Toronto Sun. They run CP stories as well. CP stands for the Canadian Press. I'm just going to go through this basically line by line, because it is incredibly biased. And this is, in a nutshell, is what we mean when we're talking about fake news and the biased landscape in Canada. Okay, so here's a piece. The headline says, Alberta Appeal Court says federal environmental impact law not okay. So here we see right off the bat, it kind of gives us a little explanation of what just happened. It says Alberta's top court said Tuesday that the federal government's environmental impact law is unconstitutional, and Ottawa almost immediately announced its plan to appeal. So in the first paragraph, we don't even get the news. We get the reaction from Ottawa. So it's not about how this law is unconstitutional. It goes right to Justin Trudeau plans to fight back. Then paragraph 2, it says the Alberta Court of Appeal's strongly worded opinion said the Impact Assessment Act is an existential threat. Notice the scare quotes there around existential threat to the division of powers guaranteed by the Constitution, and has taken a, scare quote again, wrecking ball to the constitutional rights of the citizens of Alberta and Saskatchewan. The majority of judges sided with Alberta, arguing that the legislation allowed Ottawa to put provinces in an economic chokehold and give it the means to choose winners and losers. Okay, so we have 3 paragraphs there, Harrison, that sort of establish the story, and in it, it's already torqued, right? Rather than providing a quote from the judge that wrote the decision, the one that won, right? That there was a vote and that decision won. They just pulled scare quotes to kind of like make a mockery of it, basically. But again, stressing the fact that we're not done with this and that Ottawa is going to appeal. Okay, so that's the first 3 paragraphs. 4th paragraph, it goes straight to Justin Trudeau, right? It doesn't go to the judge who wrote the decision. It doesn't go to anyone in Alberta, the Kenney government in Alberta, who are the ones pushing this review. It goes straight to Justin Trudeau, basically defending himself, saying the justification behind putting the bill in place in the first place. Then we have 4 paragraphs in a row of Justin Trudeau quotes, okay? So we're not getting a fair idea of what is going on, why this case was determined. We are just hearing Justin Trudeau's justification. I just want to pause right here, Harrison, because if you go back to any of the laws that Stephen Harper wrote in the former Conservative government that were struck down by a court, the emphasis was exactly flipped, right? It would be like, this judge, this heroic judge, wrote this decision, scrapping this horrible law that Harper tried to introduce, and it would be all about quotes like bashing the government. Whereas here, it's flipped. They don't quote the decision. They quote the Prime Minister explaining himself and saying why he is right off the top.